Attention freaks! It's me! Devar, I'll be honest with you. I'm feeling a bit down in the dumps. I'm a bit depressed, I'm a bit sad, and I'm trying my best to summon up the necessary energy that's required to carry a podcast on my two significantly broad shoulders. I'm like the Atlas of this podcast right now. I guess we also have you two to be the Hercules who takes up the duty for one day only. But enough about Greek mythology. Do you know what I like to do?
What?
When I feel down. When I'm feeling sad and I need to prop myself up.
Yeah.
I like to come up with Star Wars porn names. Boba Fett. Famous bounty hunter, Boba Fett.
Oh no.
Dildos Trapesian. Princess Leia Organs.
Oh no.
You've heard about Chewbacca? Well, get ready for Itassa.
Oh no. Itassa Chutassa.
Emperor Masturbaton.
You could go all night, can't you, with this?
I happen to have a few names. Of course, you have everyone's favorite Sith Lord, Dick Raider.
Why does that sound like more an Indiana Jones?
Lord Dick Raider. Although, personally, I prefer this old moniker, Analkin.
Oh, no.
Analkin, Sky Railer. And you cannot forget about his much less experienced son, Poke.
Oh. I mean, the worst I could think of would probably be Count Dooher.
That's a good one. I'm going to add it to the checklist. But hey, if you're not into any of this, you can always come solo.
Damn it.
I had to save the best for last.
Yeah, you have to finish with the last one.
I have to finish with come solo, obviously. It's just,
of course.
You cannot beat come solo. Welcome to the MADPlay podcast, everybody, for whomever actually is left.
Yeah.
Because I'm assuming everybody must have clicked out of this video.
I'm about to make everyone else click away from this video.
And keep it simple.
So, I was in Poland, and in that time, I was watching a lot of television. Poland has a lot of neat programming, showing off a lot of old movies from way back in its time period, like the 60s, 70s.
I think I know where this is going.
You know, the 80s and even 90s movies. They even have a fair few animations that I really like, and some, you know, that I've seen in English, but they don't air anymore on English channels.
Is this about the fact that Poland doesn't do real localization or dubbing over the shows broadcast on television, and you have to suffer through a terrible narrator basically narrating over the entire action?
You think I would bring a rant to this?
Well, I say that because we've had this rant already.
Nope.
Okay.
It's about something more pressing, especially since it's still around in modern times, which I really, really detest. And this is also connected to an advertisement for a Disney Plus show, a Marvel one, at some point, that was heavily advertised. I will get to that, but first things first, things I was watching were basically from mainly the 80s and 90s. Some of them were Mel Gibson movies.
Uh-oh.
A series of action movies, buddy cop style, comedy, over-the-top action. He plays a crazy cop.
You are describing every Lethal Weapon ever. I have to say, the series really peaked at number 5. It's Always Sunny reference.
Of course. The most famous scene in one of the Mel Gibson movies that I saw was pulling his buddy off the toilet to go into the bathtub that was about to explode.
Yes.
So, anyway, I was tempted to click off those movies at some point based on the treatment of female characters in said movies and the general vibe of lines like when Mel Gibson befriends a dog that was vicious. The woman looks very confused, and then he just utters the line, "It's a guy thing, you wouldn't understand." I had to resist the urge to switch to another channel because there was nothing else on. And
well, that's the beauty of 80s and early 90s action films. You loved them when you were a kid, then you grow up, you go back to it, given the opportunity. It turns out they have not aged the best.
The reason I bring this up is because there was basically an advertisement for the Marvel She-Hulk show, on Disney Plus. And I was so mad at one line that was said in this film, in this advertisement, in this trailer for the show. And it was basically the Hulk talking to the inevitable She-Hulk. I do not care about the real names of these characters. I never commit them to memory because I'm a dirty casual viewer of Marvels.
Most people are.
The Hulk said to her that the transformation is activated based on fear and anger. And she said, and I quote, "That is the basis for any female on the planet."
Okay. So I understand why that line might have irked you, because it seems to feed off a stereotype, but you are viewing that line out of its original context. The delivery is a bit, miffy. Yes, let's go with miffy. It's a cute little quaint word, isn't it? It's a bit of a miffy delivery in that sense. I understand that. The intent for that whole scene was twofold. One, it was to illustrate the difference in character and personality between He-Hulk and She-Hulk, if you will.
Yeah.
In that Bruce Banner was entirely misguided about the way the transformation works, and he has to come to the realization that his own Hulk works that way because he has a certain level of pent-up trauma with which he has to learn to deal. While, on the other hand, from her perspective, it's more about how women are generally treated in a patriarchal society. The idea that all females have pent-up aggression and rage, that they bury deep, the psychology of that, the motivation for that line, comes from the fact women living in a man's society means that they can never actually truly express themselves, and they have to constantly watch what they say in front of their male colleagues in workplaces, for example.
Yeah.
So I understand the context, I understand the intent, but I also understand why that would absolutely irk you.
Yeah.
When you just come across it, especially if you pair it with the other problematic line in an actually problematic context, in a problematic film from 30 years ago. And they were all presented parallel to each other, which doesn't really paint a nice picture in your mind.
It does not, though, because essentially what it painted to me was society is still continuing the bullshit that basically, apparently, emotions and general personalities are cookie cutters based on people's gender and what they're born with. You cannot exclusively own an emotion. You cannot exclusively own a personality trait. Because if you do, you're basically setting up expectations that is going to harm people in the process. Because that's how the world works, apparently.
Well, the world, unfortunately, does still work like that, especially with the current rise of fascism on a global scale that wishes to keep the world running that way. The only element that's truly changed is a form of awareness into what has been the gender dynamics and gender politics over the years, over the centuries, in that gender does not define personalities. Personalities do not define gender, but society, whatever nebulous concept of society that is, those in power are the ones who decide what your gender is and what your personality is based on the gender. And in a way, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Of course, men living in a society have to repress their emotions and never deal with their trauma, which makes them toxic and unable to deal with themselves. And of course, in the same breath, we have women like Miss She-Hulk, who knows very well what she's about, but has to keep it down all the time because she's a working woman.
Yes.
So I'm not saying that She-Hulk is some sort of modern feminist manifesto from the freaking mouse company that finances anti-LGBT bills behind the scenes. Oh no siree, my friend. But I am saying that there is some merit in that line of dialogue depending on the context, even if the execution is a little bit flawed. So it's definitely an argument worth having and an interesting discussion also worth having, which I would be having properly with you if I cared to watch anything Marvel related. And I do not, frankly.
Honestly, I do not either. Nothing really grabs my attention, honestly. But to put a bookend to this, I do not condone anything involving manipulation of one's mindset and worldview.
I understand that. Men have to be men all the time. Women have to be women all the time. This is the female body. This is the male body. What about intersex children? This is the female body. This is the man body. As soon as you bring up actual real biology, suddenly, I'm being bullied for my views, says the TERF.
On to the next conversations.
Okay, so welcome officially to the MADPlay podcast. I am Madhog Time Master. And this guy is Devar Arkvaron. I did not do that on purpose, by the way. Okay, well, here we are with everything that's going on in the world right now.
Yeah.
The escalating threat of a third world conflict. The plague is still going. The energy crisis. And also, as far as my own country is concerned, we have Berlusconi's puppets in power, which is fun.
Yay.
And by that I mean the exact opposite of fun.
And
that could be a giant, massive tangent in its own right. But like I said, I am trying my hardest to prop myself up with the energy that's required to run a podcast right now. Discussing that will just kill my energy.
And kill the mood.
Hey everybody, therapy is good for you. But if you cannot afford therapy, there's always the next best thing, which is listening to our podcast, which all doctors agree it's as good as therapy. Don't look it up, trust me.
Yes, and it's not a pill form, don't think about it.
Would you like this blue pill, this red pill, or this rainbow-colored pill? Which makes you gay instantly, but don't tell QAnon. We have a few topics for tonight. Well, mostly one big topic. And I know exactly what this is going to be about because it's been a long time coming, hasn't it, Devar?
It certainly has been. I decided that we should talk about Monkey Island, a very specific aspect of Monkey Island.
I'm sorry, you said Monkey Island, I instantly have to hum the theme. I have to apologize, it's a Pavlovian reflex.
It's the law, in my opinion, to me.
It is the law.
Because anytime I think of Monkey Island, I have to do the theme song as well. So, there was a very specific topic I wanted to bring up with Monkey Island's latest release.
Yes, can you imagine? It's 2022, we get a new Monkey Island game.
Return to Monkey Island.
TM.
It seems to me that fans decided to drop numbering the Monkey Island games after 4, it seems.
I can understand that. Especially since I believe the framing device for this particular entry in the Monkey Island franchise is very similar to what was the framing device for the last King's Quest game, or series of games. It was episodic, if you recall.
I do recall that.
In that, it is a series of flashbacks.
So, before we could even talk about an aspect I want to talk about, which is essentially the fans and reactions to said game, I would like to talk about the series in general.
Yes!
Just to add a bit of history and context, as well as general consensus of each title, as well as my own and Madhog's input.
I'm pretty sure we both have a lot to say about Monkey Island. It is a childhood-defining phenomenon, perhaps the second most influential point-and-click adventure game of all time, second to King's Quest, for obvious reasons.
Because Monkey Island was very popular alongside games like King's Quest and Space Quest, though I would argue that King's Quest was far more popular in the US than it was in England, in my own personal view.
Yes, LucasArts games were pretty much cornering the market in Europe. I feel we have covered this conversation at some point in the past, but...
I mean, we have done a fair few talks about games like Day of the Tentacle and other LucasArts games, which...
We talked about the European scene, the actual homegrown European scene for adventure games, such as the French studio Cocktail Vision, which was acquired by Sierra in an attempt to corner the European market, because capitalism is everywhere.
The first game, The Secret of Monkey Island.
If you want to do a proper retrospective, you need to start with the creator of The Secret of Monkey Island. Actually, should we just go all the way back to the beginning of Lucasfilm Games as a company, as a whole, because it all ties into that. So, Lucasfilm Games was created in the mid-80s, I believe, if not even earlier. It was a division, obviously, of Lucasfilm, and it was given the prerogative of don't embarrass George Lucas. That's the prerogative they were given. Make whatever video game you want, just don't embarrass George Lucas. Make them good. That's a true story, apparently.
I can actually believe that for some strange reason.
Yes, it seems like something that would happen in George Lucas' world. You can say whatever you want about George Lucas and how much he apparently ruined the Star Wars, but he did value freedom of artistic expression. So anyway, our story, for the sake of brevity, begins in 1987 with the release of Maniac Mansion. It was directed by Ron Gilbert and Gary Winnick. Incidentally, all the original Lucasfilm Games alumni, such as Gary Winnick, David Fox, who created Zack McCracken and the Alien Mindbenders, with whom I've exchanged words on Twitter as I was cracking down hard on Thimbleweed Park, which I actually detested, if I'm being honest, but that's a rant for another time. All these original Lucasfilm alumni then later on would get together to form the new Ron Gilbert company that's actually at the helm of the latest Monkey Island game, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Maniac Mansion introduced us the Scum system. What is the Scum system?
The Scum system was a UI that had phrases that you could use by clicking with the mouse. So instead of having to type things like pick up object, you could just, go with your mouse pointer over to the phrase pick up and then hover over the item that you could highlight, like say a bottle, and then try and pick it up.
Yes. You can pick up a chainsaw and spend the entirety of the rest of the game looking for the gasoline for the chainsaw, but there was never any gasoline. The gasoline is a lie. This game was made by GLaDOS.
The gasoline was in another game.
Yes, the gasoline was in Zack McCracken, but there was no chainsaw. You've got to love this sort of self-referential humor when it's in small doses.
Yeah.
Maniac Mansion was officially the first actual point-and-click adventure game, because up until that point, as Devar said, we've had a typing system, which I believe was called the Parsec system. And honestly, for kids of our generation, those kinds of games are close to unplayable. I'm suddenly having Vietnam-style flashbacks to our experience with King's Quest III.
Oh no.
Mananan. Mananan. Oh my gosh, it was a nightmare, but it was most certainly memorable. So Maniac Mansion is a big middle finger to Roberta Williams and her own style of graphic adventure games. My stance for Sierra Games is the same, and Roberta Williams is the same as it has always been. King's Quest walked so that Monkey Island could run. And that says it all. So Maniac Mansion was a huge success at the time, as big of a success a adventure game for late 80s computer systems could realistically be, which isn't anything that could be even remotely compared to what the industry is today, but for the time, it was successful enough. It showcased that brand of self-referential humor that Ron Gilbert loves to an absolute fault in some cases, especially later on in his career.
Yep.
I just don't like Thimbleweed Park, I'm sorry. For many reasons. He pulls a Yokotaro in that game. I'm sorry. Okay, I said too much. It is the kind of humor that teeters between the grotesque and the macabre, but also the juvenile and self-referential. It gives Ron Gilbert's games their own unique comedic edge, which makes them memorable. The Secret of Monkey Island, which would come out in 1990, right after Zack McCracken and the Alien Mindbenders, the adaptation of the third Indiana Jones film, and Loom, which was simultaneously criminally overlooked, but also quite insufferable.
Yeah.
I think Loom as a concept is brilliant, but the ideas at play were too ahead compared to the technology that was available at the time. I feel like that Loom would be great as a modern indie game, but as a 1990s point-and-click adventure to come out in the same year as the genre-defining masterpiece, The Secret of Monkey Island, well, that's a recipe for disaster. Sadly.
Yeah, I sadly agree with that.
We have to mention Loom because Loom is baked into the very lore of Monkey Island thanks to the guy who advertises Loom in the game.
Yep, in the very first game.
Which was simultaneously cheeky, but also legitimately funny.
Yeah, it was. So, about The Secret of Monkey Island that we're about
What is The Secret of Monkey Island? Good question.
So, The Secret of Monkey Island is the story of a fledgling wannabe pirate called Guybrush Threepwood.
Yes, what a name.
Yes,
a legend was born.
A legendary name, so legendary that everyone gets it wrong. You get Flipwood, Dripgood.
Dripgood.
No one can say his surname properly.
There are many recurring jokes that we know and appreciate as longtime fans. For example, the three-headed monkey, which had a payoff already in the first game, but it kept being mentioned in every other game because it's a staple of the series. And of course, you have your set of memorable recurring characters that we all know and love. This was your cue, Devar.
Of course. The game concentrates solely on the story of Guybrush trying to become a mighty pirate.
Yes, he never officially graduates, but then again, the idea that he has to graduate in order to be a pirate goes against the idea of actually being a pirate, which is an outlaw, and that's the joke, everybody. So this needs to be established because every Monkey Island game, some more than others, have a recurring commentary about consumerism and capitalism, and pirates essentially become a form of commodity. They sell cheap t-shirts that pass as treasures. The bad guy in Monkey Island 4 actually tries to gentrify the entirety of the Caribbean and tries to exploit pirate culture for monetary gain while simultaneously burying all pirates. And of course, who could ever forget the amusement park in Monkey Island?
Yeah.
So there is a recurring critique on consumerist society, which lends itself well in a world in which pirates struggle to actually be pirates. Guybrush wants to become a pirate in a time in which it's a bad idea to be a pirate because all the pirates are too busy not pirating at all, scared as they are of an actual, literal pirate ghost.
Yep.
Named LeChuck.
Get used to that name because it's the main antagonist of the entire series.
I love his many transformations. First he's the ghost pirate LeChuck, then he's a zombie pirate LeChuck, then he's a demon pirate LeChuck. I think he went back into being a zombie or a ghost at some point. I don't know anymore.
Yeah, I'll get to that one when we actually talk about 4.
I have some pent-up feelings about 4. I've been suppressing for the better part of 20 years.
Secret of Monkey Island was released on a lot of different home computers at the time. We had the Atari ST, the Amiga, the FM Towns. Any computer under the sun, which was a gaming machine, was game for Monkey Island.
Our Intellivisions, our Commodore 64s, they were very popular in Europe, and the console market was yet to actually bloom in our old continent. I think the exception to that was the Sega Master System and then the Sega Mega Drive, also known as Sega Genesis in the USA.
Yeah, they were the only consoles that were really super popular. That was until Nintendo brought the Super Nintendo out to England, at least.
And of course, all bets are off when the PlayStation debuted.
So yeah, Secret Monkey Island, it's a lovely game, I will say. Lots of lovely backgrounds, effects, lots of details. The characters that you meet and talk with, funny, fantastic, and memorable for their own reasons.
For a computer game from the year of 1990, which is a long time ago, To think of it. It has aged surprisingly well. Last time we played it, it was 2014, I believe, which is also a fair few years ago, come to think of it.
Yeah, it's been a long time ago.
Yes, we did a MADPlay series of it, and don't go back and watch it, I'm embarrassed of myself. I don't like the way I sound. I do not like it at all. Don't listen to it. It's embarrassing. It is, as the kids say, a cringe. Barely putting together a cohesive and coherent sentence. I still have issues like that, but hey, that's what editing is for.
Yep.
Wink.
Also join the club with me. Anyway, there were a few important characters introduced in this game. Guybrush, and LeChuck, and of course, Elaine Marley.
And don't forget the greatest Monkey Island character of all time, Stan. By law, we have to hum the Stan's theme.
Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, that would become his theme only from the second game onward.
There were also a lot of other characters introduced, but only a few of them will ever pop up ever again in the series.
There's the Hermit, Herman. Yep. Herman the Hermit.
Herman Toothroth.
Not an especially recurring character, but his appearances are memorable for better and for worse.
Yeah. So, yeah, recognizable, let's call it that.
Yes, clearly an homage to Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island, the Hermit Ben. There are obviously many references to Treasure Island and to pirate literature as a whole, as well as the fact that this game, much like the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise, is inspired by the Pirates of the Caribbean ride at Disneyland. That was the primary, most direct inspiration for this game about pirates.
I think I should also mention that, which you've already mentioned already, ages ago, that Ron Gilbert was the main creator of the series of Monkey Island.
He was the principal creative thrust for the early days of Lucasfilm games, I would say.
Basically ingrained into the identity of the series in some way.
Here's a fun fact about the name Guybrush specifically.
Yeah.
The reason why the character is named Guybrush, which I realize seems like an oddly specific choice for a name for your main character. Then again, we also have Bobbin Fredbear for Loom, and he was 100% named that because it sounded like a Lord of the Rings character. Let's not fool ourselves.
Of course.
But anyway, the reason why we have Guybrush is because in the planning phase of the game, the developers have come up with an idea, a general outline of what the character was supposed to be. So they had a model for him, and the model was saved in a brush file.
Oh.
And since they were yet to decide a name, they simply called the file Guy. Guy.brush. Guybrush, which is just the best kind of anecdote you could possibly hope to hear from this.
I honestly did not know that. I'm happy to hear that.
So the story of The Secret of Monkey Island is very simple. Guybrush, as we said, wants to become a pirate. He cannot become a pirate because all the pirates are too scared to be pirates and too lazy to do anything but drink grog. 3, 2, 1, grog! 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 That's another unspoken law.
Yeah.
References. In the midst of proving his worth as a pirate, which means a series of idiotic tasks, he meets the Governor Elaine Marley, the governor of Melee Island, which is the initial island that the main character inhabits. Then comes Ghost Pirate LeChuck, who kidnaps Elaine because he wants to marry her, and they all go to Monkey Island, TM. So Guybrush has to assemble a crew, go to Monkey Island, be a hero, make a mess of things, and accidentally save the day in the process. That's just normal administration for our typical point-and-click adventure protagonist, Guybrush Threepwood, and it turns out that Elaine Marley did not actually need any saving. She had her own plan to dispatch of LeChuck, which Guybrush obviously ruined. Guybrush could write an entire encyclopedia about failing upwards by sheer dumb luck.
If you look for the word bumbling idiot in the dictionary, Guybrush's picture would be in it.
Yes, there is a reason why every adventure game protagonist in the history of the genre is either a Guybrush Threepwood or a King Graham, with very few exceptions and outliners in between. This is just the prototypical bumbling hero you would expect from these kinds of games. He's a buffoon, is out of his depth, but is somehow resourceful, and by sheer dumb luck he gets things done. He's occasionally a bit snide and mean, but the situation usually calls for it, if is well written. Because I've seen many adventure game protagonists who try to emulate the Guybrush formula, but they make them too mean-spirited, whilst intending to make them seem charming and nice. I have a specific example in mind, which is a German game titled The Inner World. I would describe the protagonist of the game imaging SpongeBob, but not funny, and also has a body count. Okay, back to Monkey Island. That's the basic gist of the first game.
Yeah.
It was iconic, it was funny, it had a striking art direction, very much encapsulates the technological, artistic visions of 1990s computer gaming. Yeah. And then we have the sequel, which came out just 1 year after that.
Surprising, honestly. 1 year after the first game.
In many ways, it shows it was quickly put together, which means a lot of its assets feel incomplete. From an aesthetic standpoint, it was quite the departure from the first game, even though it only came out 1 year earlier. Suddenly, both the backgrounds and the foregrounds are a lot more detailed, and they have this storybook illustration quality to them.
And of course, there's a lot of neat details in every scene. And of course, the important part is the humor is still much alive and kicking.
I would say that the humor in Monkey Island 2... Oh, I'm sorry, I meant to say LeChuck's Revenge! Monkey Island 2 is the darkest and most macabre it has ever been in the entire series.
I agree.
And given the character progression that Guybrush has had compared to the place he initially occupied in the first game, it is an appropriate direction in which to take the comedy. Guybrush is an absolute scumbag in this game. Very much on purpose, though. Very much on purpose. He became drunk on his own hype after being the man who defeated LeChuck by sheer luck.
Telling the story over and over again to fellow pirates.
By now, very much bored with it and don't care. They have their own lives. They work 9 to 5 jobs pirating.
Yeah. Guybrush decides he is going to find a treasure. An elusive treasure by the name of Big Whoop.
I wonder if it's a bait and switch. I am going to say that this game is rather infamous for its ending, which has divided the fans. It is fair to say it is the most controversial element in the entirety of the series. That's how much this ending stuck with people, for better and decisively for worse.
I would actually agree with that point as well. It was actually something I was going to bring up as well, since compared to the first one, which was more straightforward, this one leaves behind a very specific
aftertaste.
Yes,
let's go with that. Remember when I mentioned Thimbleweed Park?
Yeah.
And how Ron Gilbert pulls a Yoko Taro in that game?
Yes, I do.
Well, I'm actually being unfair to Ron Gilbert, because Ron Gilbert pulls a Ron Gilbert in that game, which is the same Ron Gilbert he pulls in Monkey Island 2, but about 10 million times worse. And 10 million times more phoned in, if you ask me. I'm not going to expand on any of this, by the way. This is one of those if you know types of deals.
In my own personal opinion, Monkey Island 2 is probably the best of the series, and a lot of fans actually agree with that sentiment, despite the ending.
I'm going to say that for my money, I think the first one is the best one. There are a few individual matters to consider. The art direction in the second game is superior in many ways. It is especially impressive considering it's only 1 year apart from each other.
Yeah.
The first game had its fair share of complex backgrounds, especially when we get to the actual Monkey Island. But for the most part, we have very flat-colored sceneries. Not much in terms of shading or lighting. LeChuck's Revenge, on the other hand, introduces a fair few new technological innovations, such as the iMuse system, which is an early prototypical system for the smooth transition of musical tracks from one environment to the next. Clint Bajakian was a genius in that sense. Of course, the iconic composer of Lucasfilm and LucasArts games, Clint Bajakian, a name that you see constantly in the credits for all these games that we love. There are a lot more details that you can appreciate in its scenic composition, as well as more complex lighting and shading when the sprites of the characters interact with the environment. I still think The Secret is the best game in the series because, as far as I know, it is the only title of the series that has no issues or controversies whatsoever. Just this perfect, neat little package of a game with a beginning, a middle, and end. Chuck's Revenge. I am in the camp that doesn't believe the ending works for that game. I think actually it might have worked better if it was the ending of the first game, because it would have retroactively framed that entire first adventure as a childlike fantasy, which doesn't quite work
when you're 2 games in.
Not only that, but also because at this point Guybrush has been a pirate for years! Enough time to become bitter and discontent with his own status as a pirate. So he's basically a 20 years old has-been already. And it doesn't quite work with the interpretation that it is all just a fantasy. Which it is not, because if you recall, the ending to Monkey Island 2 also contradicts itself. Because after it is revealed that, spoiler alert by the way, after it is revealed that it was apparently all fake, it was all a fantasy of a child playing with his brother in an amusement park, then it is also revealed that it might not be that, because it might actually be a trap, so there is that ambiguity. But then it is also revealed that it is actually literally a trap, because Elaine Marley tells you that this is definitely a trap.
Yeah, because she hopes that nothing's gone wrong.
So I think this is the worst kind of ambiguous ending, because it is not an ambiguous ending at all, and the only result that it accomplishes is to not give a proper ending to the adventure, the same adventure in which you were invested since game number 1. That's my perspective.
So I will say 2 more things about LeChuck's Revenge. Surprisingly, the ending of Monkey Island 2 got hinted at in Monkey Island 1 in a very small way. Extremely small. It's a dialogue that you could easily miss if you don't choose the option when you're sword fighting all the random pirates. But there's a throwaway line when, if you choose the dialogue, why is the background always the same here? The pirate that you're fighting basically says, "Come on, Guybrush, play along."
This is why one would posit that the ending to Monkey Island 2 would have worked better as the ending to Monkey Island 1 without the added contradiction.
But another thing I will add about LeChuck's Revenge, but also about The Secret Monkey Island. Monkey Island 2 was originally released on way fewer platforms. We're talking like Microsoft Windows, DOS, Amiga, and Macintosh, to name a few. Many, many years later, special edition versions of Secret of Monkey Island and LeChuck's Revenge were made, and they were released in the year of 2009, 2010, I believe. So if you're able to buy them probably on Steam these days.
If you're going to do that, I have one specific recommendation. These games come in two flavors. The special edition with all the remade graphics, which personally I find really awful.
Same, actually. I am not a fan.
Or the original classic vintage Monkey Island. That's the ideal way to play it. Although there is a catch.
Yes, there's a big catch I was about to say.
Yes, the catch is that the fully voice-acted version with legendary Guybrush voice actor Dominic Armato and all the other cast that you have loved since Curse of Monkey Island is only available in the special edition, normally. Thankfully, you can download a patch that is able to transfer all the voice lines from the special edition to the classic edition. Probably the best way to experience these games that is currently available.
I actually agree with that sentiment as well, because the voice lines do add a lot to Monkey Island 1 and 2, but only under the classic because they make Guybrush look like he's wearing a wig.
Everybody pretty much agrees that the special edition looks awful. Thankfully, Monkey Island fans aren't the type to throw hissy fits for the way their favorite game series would look.
Yeah,
Imagine if that would happen.
Yeah, totally. Let's put a pin on that. So anyway, Curse of Monkey Island, you mentioned that. So
okay, hold on. Slow down there, Tiger. First of all, we need to...
Yeah.
It's important to keep in mind that LeChuck's Revenge was Ron Gilbert's last game with Lucasfilm Games.
Before he would go on to make his own company of Humongous Entertainment.
Humongous Entertainment might mean a lot more to our US friends than it means to us Europeans.
Yes.
Because I don't think any of us has ever played Freddy Fish. Honestly, those games were a bit too kid-friendly for our tastes. At that point, we were already used to the edgier sense of humor of Monkey Island and the such like. So I don't think any of us would have enjoyed Freddy Fish, Freddy Fazbear, or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
But those games have their own charm, and more importantly, they look really good. That same attention to details, carefully crafted environment, and character design, that's something that Ron Gilbert would value, perhaps more than anything else in his games, all throughout his career. Even in Thimbleweed Park, which is a love letter to the early days of Lucasfilm's games, with a particular eye to Maniac Mansion, goes hard on the environmental details. That I can certainly appreciate. I can appreciate a lot less the way it ends, or indeed how obnoxious it is with its self-referential humor. This game came out exactly 30 years after Maniac Mansion, and it wants to make sure you realize that this game is a spiritual successor to Maniac Mansion whenever it has the chance. It is so obnoxious with the meta humor that it literally has a gameplay feature that allows you to turn off the meta humor, or rather to tone it down. And if you don't tone it down, if you leave it on, then you get one of the main characters commenting sarcastically about Sierra games and their absurd puzzles. in the same room in which they reprised the infamous envelope in a microwave puzzle from Maniac Mansion. And I don't know if I'm being openly trolled here or if they are unaware of how hypocritical they are sounding right now. It's a whole deal. Gaslight, the video game.
Gaslight, the video game. Yeah. Oh.
Right. So Ron Gilbert is out of the company, and by the time LeChuck's Revenge comes out, Lucasfilm Games is done, and now we have LucasArts Games. It is the period that gave us Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, or Indiana 4, as we like to call it.
Day of the Tentacle was always
Sam and Max hit the road. On a much lesser extent, Full Throttle, The Dig.
Yeah.
And finally, the year is 1997, and we have Curse of Monkey Island. For obvious reasons, nobody wanted to touch this property after A, Ron Gilbert left, and B, that ending occurred.
Yeah, the ending.
The ending.
So, first things first, a bit of housekeeping. Totally different team worked on this. The game was released exclusively on Microsoft Windows.
It was the style at the time.
Yeah, which was the style at the time. There was no other release of this game at the time. And one of the biggest changes, all 2D animated, no sprites, something akin to essentially an animated show or movie.
It very much evokes a feeling of a Saturday morning cartoon. Specifically, it looks like a cartoon that might have been commissioned by an American or Canadian company, but was animated in France. That's a very specific example I have in mind.
Yeah.
It's been enough of a gap between that title and LeChuck's Revenge that the complete overhaul and change in aesthetic, in artistic direction, won't feel as jarring.
And also in the game interface that you use in it.
Yes, gone are all the verbs. They have been gone for a while now.
Yeah.
Now we have a much simpler system.
At the time, higher detail backgrounds and animations to enjoy.
As a game, it is a lot more bright with its choice of colors, as opposed to the much more dour, macabre presentation, gritty presentation that LeChuck's Revenge had.
It looks fantastic, honestly. To me, at the time, I felt it was a very natural fit and evolution of the Monkey Island series. It just felt right to see Guybrush being like this animated character you would see in a Saturday morning cartoon or movie on Cartoon Network or whatever.
Yes, and for the first time ever, he talked.
Yeah.
And what an iconic performance that was. Dominic Armato, the one and only voice of Guybrush Threepwood, that still reprises the character to this very day, and sounds pretty much the same, which is mesmerizing.
And this was like back in 97.
97 was also a long time ago. 1997, the year that gave us Jurassic Park: The Lost World. I wish I could think of something better, but that's the first thing that came to mind.
97 also had Fantasy VII come out that year as well, I believe.
Yes, it's actually one of the most important years for video games. Klonoa, Door to Phantom Isle, was released on PlayStation 1. I would say it's the best game ever made along with its sequel, but that's just my opinion. We had Revenges, Curses, and Escapes, but we never did find out about the secrets.
Yeah.
No, did we?
Nope. We'll get to something about that. Anyway,
okay, so this game has some issues.
So, first minute in, story basically blatantly tells you, by the way, the ending of Monkey Island 2, we're going with the whole, it was a curse thing that LeChuck put on him, on Guybrush.
Oh, so that's the Curse of Monkey Island. Okay, that was a short game.
Yeah, so it was like just first minute in.
In defense of the writers and the scenario writers and the game developers, what else could they possibly do?
Yeah,
they had two choices: either taking the original ending and its implications head on, or ignore it completely. They chose the latter, and it was for the best.
Yeah, I agree with that one, honestly, because it was actually one of the few things I don't have a problem with. Because, one, the series continues that way, and two, it's less messy to unpack and deal with.
You get rid of the old mess in order to give your new game a chance as a standalone project. But don't worry, they find a way to make it messy in its own right.
Yeah.
There is something about Monkey Island that we did not discuss.
The insult sword fighting.
In the first game, it was basically like an RPG.
Yeah.
You have to beat pirates in order to become strong, gaining experience points until you're strong enough to take the boss. Except instead of getting experience points like you would in an RPG, you get new insults. Rather, you get new setups and punchlines for brutal disses between pirates. Of course, who could ever forget you fight like a cow? Or you're the rubber, I'm the glue. Or was it I'm the glue or...
I am rubber, you are glue.
And of course, the best, most efficient comeback of all time. Oh yeah?
Yeah.
So there is an entire system in which you have to learn the insults and also learn the comeback from the insults in order to actually beat your opponents in a sword fight, because they will be so demoralized by the savagery that they will automatically surrender.
Yeah.
Fun fact, or rather not so fun fact, the prompts for the insults were conceived by Orson Scott Card of Ender's Game fame, and also massive homophobia fame.
Ish.
But he's not the one who actually created the system or applied the insults in a humorous manner, so there is a half empty, half full glass situation here to consider.
Yeah.
Anyway, Ron Gilbert completely forgets about the insult sword fighting for the sequel because it was a gimmick just for that game.
Yeah, also it was met with kind of mixed reception in the original game.
I kind of like it to do it exactly once and never again.
I actually have a soft spot for the sword fighting in Monkey Island 1, and as well as number 3, I actually do like. I actually did enjoy it back when I was younger.
I think that when Monkey Island 3 reprises the insult sword fighting and adds the obnoxious gimmick of rhyming them, that's already the point in which they jumped the shark with the gimmick. Of course, then we get to Monkey Island 4 and they find a way to nuke the shark altogether.
Yeah. Oh, we'll get to that.
We'll get to that. But anyway, there is this whole sequence of the sword fight insult, rhyming insult, that also comes with having to actually fight ships in terrible naval combat. That looks like a worse version of a Age of Empires map,
yeah,
if I'm being honest.
The whole cannon fighting to board the ship gameplay is rudimentary, let's call it that, because all you just need is stronger cannons than the other guy, and that's it. Feels very fillerish, honestly. You'd rather just get to the sword fights, in my opinion.
Honestly, I would rather just get to Blood Island and get on with the plot. But if there is one thing that's definitely iconic of this particular segment of the game, the song. A pirate I was meant to be.
Trim the sails and roam the sea.
Fun fact, or rather sad fact, this whole song was cut from the Italian version of that game.
I can understand why, but at the same time, it's so sad.
There it is, the single most quoted and iconic and remembered moment in that game.
By the way, if you're an animation fan, especially of Disney property, there's a Scotsman that you can recruit as one of your shipmates, and he is voiced by the same voice actor as Scrooge McDuck.
Yes.
I honestly did not realize it until years later when I thought about it.
Can I throttle you with a hot take for a moment?
What?
David Tennant is a bad Scrooge McDuck. There, I said it.
I think everyone knows that.
No, everybody freaking loves DuckTales, the reboot, apparently. It seems like you and I are the only ones who don't like it.
I'm not a fan of how they retooled certain characters.
That's one of its issues, but it's not the worst of its issues. Anyway, this is
not
the
worst
podcast.
Yeah, I know, but it's an aside I just wanted to say at least. So anyway, so Curse of Monkey Island, it was not as popular as number 2, LeChuck's Revenge, but it still was a fine game. Everyone liked it.
Gained a lot more popularity as the years go by.
Yeah.
As people look back fondly at this entry in the franchise before it all descended into chaos.
I mean, do we even need to talk about the story of Monkey Island games?
Well, no, not really. It's more or less the same thing. LeChuck's returns is a problem. I am the rubber, you're the glue.
Elaine Marley is involved because LeChuck loves her.
There is a certain narrative dissonance between Curse and the second game, decisively because the original creator and his own vision for the series. The recurring problem with LeChuck is that he is obsessed with Elaine Marley. He was obsessed with her in the first game, he was obsessed with her in the third game, in the fourth game, in the fifth game, but he was not in the second game. In fact, in the second game, he doesn't even mention Elaine once. He's obsessed with getting revenge on Guybrush. And that's because I think that was the intended character progression for LeChuck, according to Gilbert. Priorities have shifted. He's no longer the problematic boyfriend, or I'm being sarcastic, but when we get to Curse of Monkey Island, that progression seemingly has disappeared, along with any mentions of the controversial ending to LeChuck's Revenge. As such, LeChuck has essentially gone back to his Monkey Island 1 persona, except a lot more problematic than he was before.
Yeah.
But in a funny way, because he has a funny voice.
Indeed. Though I will say this actually, because I neglected to mention it. Out of all the forms of LeChuck, the ghost pirate, the zombie, and the demon pirate, which appears in number 3, I actually prefer his zombie form the most. Specifically, LeChuck's Revenge version, because the sprite for him makes his walk animation look absolutely creepy to behold. Unlike the third game where he just seems to walk normally and doesn't seem to have that lurch.
His design for the third game, I will say it is my favorite. I like just the weird oblong T-shaped composition of his skull and his large lips. And the fire beard looks very cool, I have to say.
Very metal.
He's also very funny as a character. He's much more funny here than he has ever been in any of the games. It was a savvy balance between threatening and funny, especially when he comes up with his elaborate Rube Goldberg killing devices.
Yeah.
But in the third game, he's gone all comedy on us, and I like him too, for that matter.
Yeah, I like it too, but yeah, since... for some reason, I don't know why I keep thinking about this. I keep thinking in the third game, during the final sequence of the game, Threepwood! And then it's like, yikes! And then he just casually asks him, have you seen where Elaine went? She said she was going to powder her nose. Priorities?
Yes, there is that exposition at the end of the game. It is what ruins the game for me. There is this need to tie up all the loose ends from the second game, including that whole shebang with the big whoop and the people who tried to find the big whoop, or rather the people who buried the big whoop, including Elaine's father.
Grandfather.
Yes, Elaine's grandfather, Horatio Torquemada Marley, was amongst the people who originally found the treasure Big Whoop. And remember that name because it's important for later. Although, it seems like a complete waste of time to try and explain what the real plot of the second game was all along, considering it did not matter at all at the end. And in fairness, you can skip the entire exposition scene if you want and just get on with it, but then you want to know what the actual plot of Monkey Island is! So it's a bit of a mess, and I really wish this game was a proper reboot. They did manage to get away from the mess of the ending, only to just head dive into a mess of their own making in an attempt to reconcile the continuity to this series, because if there is one thing that this comedy pirate series needs is to have a continuity. A continuity that they are not even capable of keeping consistent. And this is where we get to the fourth game, Escape from Monkey Island, the game that single-handedly murdered adventure games. Not really, I'm being
facetious.
I am being exaggerated. But there is a lot to say about Escape from Monkey Island, and I am just realizing now we are close to 2 hours of this recording.
About that. Escape from Monkey Island came out in the year 2000. That's like 3 years after Curse of Monkey Island. It was actually the first time one of the Monkey Island games got released not only on Windows, but also on the PlayStation 2. I actually would like to start off by saying an apology to it on one aspect that I feel is unfair now to harshly judge it on, which was basically the one thing most Monkey Island fans actually despised it for.
The 3D?
Yes, it was the first one to have the gall, the brass balls, if you will, to go away from 2D and sprites to 3D.
It should not have been a shock to anybody, considering that the game that came out between Curse and Escape was Grim Fandango, the first actual 3D adventure game that LucasArts have made, and everybody loved that game. If they were able to play it, that is. Because it was buggy as all get out.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think it's a far worse crime, the fact that we had to use tank controls to play this game, as if it were Resident Evil.
It's a love it or hate it sort of controls and has not aged well for most people.
There was a time in my life in which I was able to play Resident Evil 2 on my computer with the keyboard, but I don't want to go back to that time.
Yeah, one of those systems that basically you either get and you like it enough to deal with it, or you just despise it. It's not basically true movement. It's not exactly convenient.
It is very inconvenient in many ways, but you could theoretically get used to it. And it was much worse with Grim Fandango, because Grim Fandango did not even have text appearing on screen informing you of what exactly your character was looking at.
Yeah, you just had to look at Manny's face to see what he was looking at.
Fun fact. The interactive system that they used for these games was called Lua. There was a bar in the original Monkey Island named the Scum Bar, which was a double entendre between the word scum and the scum with 2 M's, which is the acronym for a point-and-click system that was established since Maniac Mansion.
Yeah.
In Monkey Island 4, the Scum Bar gets bought out and transformed into a trendy novelty sushi bar named Lua Bar.
Yeah, the Luau, yeah. I remember that now.
And the joke tells itself.
Yeah, it's very referential.
It is a direct sequel to Curse of Monkey Island. Guybrush and Elaine are now finally married.
They were on a honeymoon. Elaine's been declared dead.
It's another Tuesday. There is an Australian capitalist that's trying to basically real estate his way into the entirety of the Caribbeans.
Honestly, doesn't really fit in all.
Actually, I don't think that's the case, because if you recall, this series, since the beginning, had a penchant for criticizing consumerist society, pointless novelty consumption, capitalism in general. That's a recurring theme in most LucasArts games, come to think of it. Sam & Max goes to town with that. I think it's only natural as a progression at some point that we get a rich bastard who tries to gentrify the entirety of the Caribbean and exploit the local culture for his own economic gain. I think it's a natural progression. It makes perfect sense for Monkey Island to end on that note. The real enemy of pirates is, and has always been, capitalism. LeChuck himself is basically playing a second banana to this new antagonist, and you can tell he's a threat because he's rich, he's got money. Capitalism is the one thing you cannot defeat in an insult sword fighting, as it turns out.
Yeah, especially if it has a strong Australian accent.
And also, you literally cannot defeat the guy in an insult sword fighting because you cannot understand his insults.
Yeah, because his lingo is too foreign.
This villain, who, by the way, is named Ozzy Mandrill, is, I think, the strongest character in the entirety of Monkey Island. If we are measuring power levels with the insult sword fighting metric, then this man is undefeated at the craft, which makes him the strongest man in the universe. Which is funny to think about. The directors for this game were Sean Clark and Mike Stammel, who were also responsible for directing Sam & Max Hit the Road, which happens to be my favorite adventure game ever.
Yeah.
And that makes this game especially disappointing. It might be 3D, but it still very much feels like I am playing and watching Monkey Island.
It's unfair of me and other people to tell, essentially, game creators what is the natural progression of a game series. Because game creators should be allowed to try different technologies, different ways to show off a game. Presentation should also be experimented with, because otherwise we end up with a series that stays stagnant and doesn't evolve because of our perception that a game should be this way and shouldn't stray far from the formula.
That said, you are perfectly allowed to have your own opinions about art. If you don't like it, don't like it. Just don't be the worst person in the world about it.
Do not judge people who do like the game and, be an asshole about it, essentially.
Yes, and now let's talk about the reasons why this game sucks.
Actual reasons the game is awful.
For the most part, the game is actually fine. I remember having a very good time with it. I enjoyed a lot of the puzzles and the puzzle solutions. The humor is still there. The memorable characters are still there. Stan, Mari, the evil skull are still there.
Yeah, who, by the way, we forgot to mention came in Curse of Monkey Island number 3.
There are a lot, too many things that we are simply unable to mention due to time constraints, Devar.
Yeah, I know, but still, I had to caveat that since Murray was mentioned. But anyway, so a lot of it is still there that you would enjoy. The game is fine if you get used to the tank controls. I actually remember enjoying it for the most part.
And then?
Things.
Once again, we get to Monkey Island, when two distinct problems arise.
Right.
So, Devar, my friend, it's time to finally talk about Monkey Kombat! The worst idea ever in the history of everything ever of all time.
Okay, in theory, what you're told about Monkey Kombat is you have a set phrases like
Hook, Ak, Ik, Chi.
Yeah, that was
there
it.
There they are. I cannot believe I still remember those awful little meaningless words. Remember the insult sword fighting that Ron Gilbert used once for Monkey Island 1, and then it was reused in the third game, and it was already wearing off its welcome? Well, it comes back in this game, but now it's monkey insults. It is the most obtuse, unintuitive, time-consuming nonsense you could ever possibly imagine.
So the way it was explained to me in-game how Monkey Kombat worked was that you have to find the right phrase of insults in order to beat the certain monkey. In practice, I thought I was getting it down, because I was able to beat a couple after figuring out their combos of words to use against them, only to find out the combination of phrases I thought could beat a monkey was not the right phrase, because the game neglected to tell you that each class of monkey has a different combination you have to use against it. So that means you have to start from the beginning to figure out what combo works against this class of monkey.
But wait, there's more.
Guess what? I gave up the game after this.
Okay, so you never beat it? You never finished it?
No.
Okay, I somehow managed to get out this godforsaken game actually works, but I had to write all the combinations down by paper.
Yes.
Which I hated doing. What the game really wants you to do is not only learn which combination defeats which, but also the proper way for a combination to transition to another combination of words. Every combination of words is referred to with a specific dumb name. Mutilated gibbon or frenzy chimp. I don't remember these names, what these names were, but let's go with the mutilated gibbon and frenzied chimp. You would think that it is a straightforward affair. The chimp is stronger than the gibbon is stronger than another kind of animal, and then another kind of animal is stronger than the chimp. Rock, paper, scissors affair. It turns out it's a bit more complicated than that, because you also have to learn what the right transition between these various forms is, depending on the individual fight. An actual stupid dumb advice that the game gives you is to copy what the other opponent is doing in the early goings in order to learn these various combination of moves you're supposed to be making in order to beat them at this game.
Yeah, that works so well.
And you have to memorize each and every one of these combinations for each and every one of the styles of fight. If a monkey begins with a specific move, counteract with another specific move, but it doesn't work for another monkey or something along those lines. It is rules on top of more complicated rules, and they kill the fun of playing this game.
Yeah.
Greetings one and all, Future Devar here. So in order to cover Monkey Kombat properly, we decided to read a little excerpt by somebody by the name of Nancy Griffin, Burpee. So thank you for this, Burpee. Last Ditch Monkey Kombat Instructions by Nancy Griffin. Have you given up? Are you frustrated and want to break your Monkey Island CD into itty bitty shards of plastic? Actually, I think Monkey Kombat was the reason my PC broke. Has Monkey Kombat caused you to pull out your hair when you are so close to the end? Well, fret no more. The following instructions will be the undoing of Monkey Kombat secrets. Important things to keep in mind. This is going to be confusing, but that's why you're here, isn't it? 1. Monkey Kombat is a learned art. 2. You learn the information needed to win by practicing. You don't say. 3. You will have to practice. There is no way around it. 4. There are 5 different monkey stances. Anxious Ape, which is double A. Bobbing Baboon, which is double B. Charging Chimp, which is double C. Drunken Monkey, which is DM. Gimpy Gibbon, which is double G. Each stance beats 2 other stances. To change from one stance to another, you must utter 3 different monkey sounds from possible 4 sounds. Ak, chi, oop, eek. When you have a draw, no one wins. The sounds needed to change from one stance to another is the same changing from either direction. If you want to change from Anxious Ape to Bobbing Baboon, and the 3 sounds are Ak, Oop, Chi, you can also change from Bobbing Baboon to Anxious Ape by say Ak, Oop, Chi, the same 3 sounds. Also remember that these same codes work backwards. If you are Anxious Ape and want to be Charging Chimp, you would use Chi, Eek, Oop. The same for Charging Chimp to Anxious Ape. AA to CC equals CEO. Anxious Ape to Charging Chimp, type in Chi, Eek, Oop. AA beats BB and GG, BB beats CC and DM, CC beats AA and GG, DM beats AA and CC, GG beats BB and DM.
You need to fight Timid Monkey, Smelly Monkey, and Brawny Monkey in practice fights to gain all the information that you need to beat JoJo Jr.
Number 16. Memorize everything you've just read. Perfect.
You start with Timid Monkey and you both are probably Anxious Ape. The monkey will probably go first during early practice rounds. He utters chi, eek, oop and becomes Charging Chimp. You lose a banana. Write down CC beats AA and also to change from AA to CC and CC to AA. So you say chi, eek, oop, you have become Charging Chimp and zap your opponent.
Yet,
so unfortunately you'll lose a couple of times. Use the spacebar. Take your time figuring out what beats what while pause and then zap him.
You have a
AA
draw,
is beating and you can move on to the next monkey. You both now become Bobbing Baboon and GG goes first. DM beats AA and CC should then GG becomes Charging Chimp. You lose a banana. And all that write down the sound also to change CC to AA and CEO. BB says AA moves on to Brawny Monkey. CC so the last code is Joe A. So wait, JoJo's CC flips at the end. Use time to know your codes and you will see that. The sponsor of the practicing set. CC uses what he finds the bias on
I hope this makes just enough sense to help you understand the information needed to compete and win at Monkey Kombat!
You have to master the Monkey Kombat in order to progress in the game, and then, to add insult to injury, you have to do it again in literally the final boss. When you thought you're done forever with this stupid Monkey Kombat business, you literally have to redo it for the final boss. And the worst part, the absolutely worst part about this Monkey Kombat, and this is really what kicks you in the nether regions, the correct combinations of moves that are necessary to beat this game are randomized with every new playthrough.
Yep.
So you have to relearn how to play this game from the beginning. So this is where most people stopped playing the game and never came back to it. It was a bad idea, it was badly implemented, it doesn't work for an adventure game, terrible as a concept. Fighting monkeys by making monkey sounds in very specific combinations. In one playthrough you might think Mutilated Gibbon is Hook Hack Chi, but in another playthrough it becomes Hook Chi Ak.
So I'm going to say this at least, because I want to get away from Monkey Kombat and go to another problem to highlight about Monkey Island 4. So, remember how we said that Curse basically had its own mess and, in fixing it?
Why, yes, I do. It was only a few minutes ago, after all.
They fixed it, right, in their own mind's eye in Monkey Island 3. Only to retcon it right here and now.
I said before that Monkey Island does not need to have a continuity because it's a pirate comedy game, but since they decided to actually have a continuity in this, the least they could have done was to talk with each other. It doesn't just retcon what was established in the third game about the second game, it also retcons the backstory of a specific character. And now it's finally time to address the old man-shaped elephant in the room, that is, Herman Toothrot.
Herman Toothrot tells the story of how he ended up stranded on Monkey Island, and as he puts it, he basically got sunk into a whirlpool by Ozymandias, and then it turns out that Herman Toothrot is not his real name because he forgot what his real name was when he got stranded on Monkey Island after some shenanigans with puzzles of trying to make him remember things.
Including Monkey Kombat.
He ends up telling you that he is Horatio Marley, lost grandfather of Elaine Marley.
And it's about at this point that 3/4 of the fandom exploded.
And through the biggest fit of rage.
It is a blatant, absurd even, retcon in two major ways. One, because Horatio Marley had already his own established backstory, and it had to do with LeChuck and the Big Whoop. That is thrown out of the window because suddenly Ozymandias was responsible for it.
Yes, because we had to sell the new villain.
Yes. But most egregious of all, this contradicts what is the established backstory of the character of Herman Toothroat as it was told in the first game. Herman Toothroat was some guy that has nothing to do with Horatio Torquemada Marley and the Marley family, which was already a messy backstory in its own right, but now it's an even bigger mess because 2 backstories were retconned at the price of 1. Marvel DC hijinks, let me tell you.
I know, right? To be honest, I was like mind-blown in the worst way possible by that.
I did not even realize it. As I was playing the game, I did not even realize it at the time that it made no sense. It was only after replaying the older games that I realized, wait a minute, this makes no sense.
I knew from the offset it made no sense. I felt so insulted from my intelligence of being invested in the entire story and mythos of Monkey Island.
Speaking of retcons, what do you think of the giant monkey head that was originally the entrance to hell itself? Now turns out to be the head of a giant mecha. A monkey mecha, a mecha monkey, if you will. Honestly, I kind of like that, but then I had to play Monkey Kombat again in the final boss, so I didn't like it as much.
Piss off about that, because I just don't know how you could have it be a robot and the entrance of hell in one.
Furthermore, it is a mecha that supposedly stretches out through the entirety of the underground system of Monkey Island. But the mecha is not really big enough to cover the entire island. So, at the end of the day, it's a silly game with a silly premise and a silly resolution. It doesn't care about continuity. That's fine. Honestly, like I said about 3 or 4 times by now, Monkey Island should not have a continuity per se. It should be more akin to an episode of SpongeBob. Every game should be like an episode of SpongeBob, pretty much self-contained. The next episode will just reset everything because it's a cartoon. Don't write a continuity for a series like Monkey Island unless you can actually keep it consistent.
Escape from Monkey Island.
Well, I sure want to escape from this game, if you know what I'm saying.
So, it didn't do so well. I mean, sure, it reviewed really well by critics, but most of the fan base were very
disappointed.
Very vocal about their disappointment with the game. Mostly about how it looked, as well as the retcons and Monkey Kombat.
Nobody likes Monkey Kombat. Nobody.
And on a lesser extent, the tank controls.
You can get used to the tank controls. You can never get used to Monkey Kombat because it's different every time you play this game. I guess that elevates the replay value of Escape from Monkey Island.
Yeah. So,
Escape from Monkey Island was the last adventure game LucasArts ever produced. And while the genre never really went away, that was the end of its more mainstream popularity, although calling it mainstream would be a stretch. It has to be said that at this point in time, LucasArts was becoming the Star Wars gaming company, which pushed to the side every and all original projects that don't do as well as Star Wars, for obvious reasons. Monkey Island was one of them, and of course the cancelled Sam & Max Freelance Police was one of them. But then there was a light in the fog by the name of Telltale Games, which introduced the concept of episodic games to revitalize the adventure game genre. And that company gave us the Sam & Max sequel that we all wanted.
Yeah.
And for that I will forever be grateful. That is before they became the film licensed gaming company. And,
the narrative gaming.
Anyway, this company, which was also started by former LucasArts alumni such as Dave Grossman, gave us a 5th Monkey Island game, which I didn't play.
I barely touched it, actually. I've only just recently got the game myself. I've only played it once so far, but I can only tell you so much of it right now because of that reason. So the game was released in 2009 and was created by Telltale Games, but it also has the distinction of having some of Ron Gilbert's fingerprints all over it, so to speak. He didn't direct it or have anything major to do with the game, but he certainly had his say in it. So this game was released back on the WiiWare. Remember WiiWare, guys?
I certainly do.
By the way, just to make sure, it was basically the original Nintendo Wii and not the Wii U that this was released on.
Well, obviously, it's 2009.
This game was also released on PC as well. Guybrush is on his way to save Elaine Marley once again.
When did Elaine become such a damsel in distress?
I know, right? Jeez. Essentially, LeChuck's up to his evil plans of using voodoo magic on a certain monkey in order to gain the powers of some sort of evil entity or some description
this
or
sounds
power.
Incredibly tiresome at this
Yeah,
point.
I think even Guybrush and Elaine basically make fun of the fact that one of the most ridiculous plans that's ever happened.
It doesn't make it any less tiresome. If anything, it makes it more tiresome.
This is basically the tutorial, essentially, of getting used to the controls and such, and on PC, I'm not a fan of it. How you're supposed to control Guybrush in this, you hover over an area you want to walk to, hold it, and move around the direction you want Guybrush to walk into while moving the mouse. It is so awful. I should recheck the game's options to see if there's an easier way to play this game, because I'm not a fan of the movement. I don't know why I couldn't just click on a place and then have him move there. Instead, I have to click and hold for him to walk and then move the mouse so he turns in the direction. I don't know why. Everything else is rudimentary. Item usage and all that. And before you know it, the actual main story happens where Guybrush, due to being a buffoon and having to concoct a new sword with root beer out of subpar ingredients, let's call it that, and basically turns LeChuck human again, and Guybrush gets an undead hand that has a mind of its own.
Wait, hold on! This is the plot of The Evil Dead!
I actually have
Part 2! Is this an homage?
Maybe? I haven't played the game.
Does he cut off his hand with a chainsaw?
I haven't seen that part yet, but anyway, I've barely got into the game, so this is all I know about it. The game's humor is kinda there. I mean, I did chuckle at some lines here and there, so maybe there's some hope that this could be entertaining, but the fact I've not gotten back to it shows I'm not really desperate to see how it goes, and I've got all 5 episodes of this game. It did gain some positive reception, but nothing too groundbreaking as far as I could tell.
And now, finally, we get to the latest release in the series, which is Return to Monkey Island.
Imagine the shock on everyone's faces. Long dormant series basically makes a grand return.
Out of all the releases in the series, this was the biggest lapse of time between games.
13 years if you don't count the special editions that were released.
This is the first new Monkey Island title since Tales from 2009. And it is fair to say that nobody expected it to happen. But then again, nobody expected a comeback for Klonoa in 2022, me included. So that's honestly a very welcome change of pace.
Yeah.
Oh, and also, let's not forget we're getting new Simon the Sorcerer next year.
Return to Monkey Island should have been a breath of fresh air. The fact it's been 13 years, the graphical style is back to 2D.
The animation is more akin to rigged puppets in the classic Flash style. So it is 2D animation, but it is rigged puppetry. It's not traditionally animated like Curse was. It fits with the idea of this franchise being an ever-evolving entity. Every game that we discussed had its own recognizable art style, aesthetic, and direction. The second game was different from the first one. The third one was different. The fourth one was different. Tales was also different. They were all different, unique, and recognizable, distinguishable from one another. So it would only stand to reason that the newest entry in this series, with the largest lapse of time between releases, would have a completely new, different style. But in spite of every title being so unique and distinguishable from one another, there is always that very specific Monkey Island charm to it. They are always recognizably Monkey Island games. You have the theme song, you have the style of humor, you have Dominic Armato as Guybrush, you have callbacks and references, both verbal and environmental. Return to Monkey Island is very much a return in many ways. So, of course, everybody reacted to the different art style in a perfectly reasonable, calm, and collected manner. This entire retrospective started specifically because you wanted to talk about the stupid negative reaction to Return to Monkey Island because of the way it looks.
Ron Gilbert came back for this game, so he's back in the director's chair, he's running the show.
Not only that, but Ron Gilbert managed to get back the IP of Monkey Island for his own gaming company, which is the best possible case scenario. Before that, the game was existing in a limbo space.
In the vault of Disney.
In the vault of freaking Disney, which owns Lucasfilm, and therefore also LucasArts, and your very soul. And also fair play to Tim Schafer for saving many of the classic point-and-click adventures from the Lucasfilm and LucasArts library from oblivion. Corporations and CEOs aren't going to care about preservations, but the actual artists who made the things you love, they most likely will.
Another thing I should bring up as well. This is one of the main reasons I had essentially a reflective moment about how I felt about Escape from Monkey Island and its graphical style.
Fair enough.
Because of what happened here with this particular game. In my opinion, when I saw the trailer for the first time, I actually was in love with the style. It was different, but in a good way. It gives off the impression that it's a storybook. And just the overall character, it just kind of brings out, especially in the voice actors who give life to it. It just feels right.
If I'm being honest, you know that I've liked every single style that was employed in every single Monkey Island game. This is the first time that I actually dislike the presentation. Something about the way these characters move or the way they are animated or designed just doesn't do it for me. But that's okay. It's my personal opinion. That's fine. Like I said, it's fine to have your own personal opinions about art. But we have to draw the line to disliking something so much that you decide it's fine and cool to harass the people who are making the game you love because you don't like the artistic direction that it's taking. This is why we can't have nice things, because you are tormenting people so much that they have to erase their social media presence entirely in order to escape abuse. You do not do this to anybody, especially not the people you supposedly hold in high regard.
This is kind of why when I first heard about Ron Gilbert and how he had to essentially cut himself off from social media, from basically dealing with fans because of the way they treated him, was just disgusting and heartbreaking, honestly. Because I just felt like it was unfair that everyone else who was on board with it and it respected his artistic decision had to be punished as well, because
you also have to realize that negativity and outrage is a self-fueling machine in the world of social media, and the algorithm that feeds off of this particular negativity and proceeds to boost it, it is amplified tenfold. And it's reflected back at the victims of said hurling. 10 times over. And you also have to consider that there are a lot of people who just grifts off outrage for the sake of a quick buck, because it's their entire business practice. Since Gamergate opened the floods of that particular business direction, which also in the grand scheme of things happens to be a very helpful tool to recruit people in the far right, and that's an entire discourse that I should not be getting into for the sake of my own mental health.
Agreed.
The point is, do not threaten people's lives over something you don't like.
It's so insignificant. It doesn't
it is
change
so
anything.
Stupid. The game is coming out either way, and you are going to buy it either way because you are a slave to your own nostalgia. So shut the hell up. Say you don't like it for this and that reason, and then move on with your life. Don't obsess it as if it is your only identity, building your entire identity over a corporate IP. This is exactly what Serial Experiments Lane was warning us about. In the most simple way possible to describe that show, it was a cautionary tale about being terminally online. And ironically, the writer of that show himself, Chiaki, became terminally online by writing a Digimon Tamer script about the kids fighting a literal cancel culture monster. Which ruins both Lane and Digimon Tamers at the same time. Same writer, by the way. People getting older and spending too much time on the internet are not a good fit for one another. The more a fan of something is old, and the more time they spend on the internet, the more they will turn into a Star Wars fan.
Yes.
Boom, baby!
It's just toxic and making porn names, got it. Okay.
Dildo Strapician.
Come
solo!
I will say two things about my intentions in the future for when it comes to Return to Monkey Island. I will actually intend to buy it someday when I get the chance, because I'm actually interested to see where it goes, and I've heard nothing but good things from words of people that I actually trust who actually gave it a fair shake. Though I will say one thing that's interesting about it. Ron Gilbert actually goes out of his way to reference every Monkey Island game ever made in the past, including the ones he didn't work on, including 4.
Yes, there is Mari in this game. I want to bring this up, actually, since you brought it up indirectly. Yeah. One of the things I think people were legitimately worried about was that this could be a reboot of sorts, or at least something that would work as a sequel to only the first 2 games and ignore everything else. Such was not the case.
I'm actually stoked to give the game a go at some point in the future.
And you know what? I am stoked as well, because we are definitely doing a MADPlay series of that. I have decided. So says Madhog, so it shall be.
I think with that, we should call it a night, honestly.
Yes, there is a lot to say about Monkey Island as a whole and its significance, its place in our hearts. And at the same time, there is a lot more that could have been said, but it would require multiple podcasts, honestly.
Yeah.
But I think that Scarfulu, that British guy on YouTube, is doing a great job with his own coverage and retrospective of the entire Monkey Island series, frame by frame, beat by beat, puzzle by puzzle. A massive undertaking. I'm going to put a link to his video series about Monkey Island in the description of this video, because I think that's as good and thorough a look back at Monkey Island the games can be.
Yeah.
So, once again, thanks for joining us. We've been Madhog Master and Devarak Varon, Mighty Pirates, of course.
I've been Devarak Varon, and he's been Madhog Master, Mighty Pirates indeed. A pirate we were meant to be.
Yes, look behind you, there is a 3-headed monkey.
We can all avoid scurvy if we eat an orange.
4-range?
We'll see you next time, folks.
Yes, and always remember, You're the glue. I'm the cow. No, wait. You're the monkey. I am the combat. No, I'm...
Good night, buddy.
Something. Come solo. Good night, everybody. Monkey Combat!